ASMR. It's been a little minute since I've made a video, mostly because January has been very crazy, but in like a good way. I was out of town for a couple weeks for work and then vacation, and then we had a lot of family stuff going on, but all good things. I figured that a good kind of way to end January would be to do a January reading wrap up. Now, I'm not one of those people that can read 10 books in 1 month. I'm very envious of people that can, but I read 4 books for the month of January, and for me, who is a bit of a slower reader and more casual, like there are a couple days where I just don't pick up a book. For me, 4 books is pretty good. I know people can read like 4 books in a week, but for me, 4 books a month is pretty good. And my goal for 2026 is to read 30 books. So I think we're off to a good start. I'm not going to do any spoilers, but I'm just going to probably read the blurbs of the books just in case anyone's interested in picking them up. I only have 1 that I own physically, and 2 of them are ebooks that I read on my Kindle, and then 1 of them was an audiobook that I listened to on Spotify. So we only have 1 physical one, and the physical one is the first one I read for the year, and it is Playground by Richard Powers. It is a paperback, so the tapping is not as good as a hardcover, but obviously paperback's going to be cheaper, so. Now, this was my first Richard Powers book, but you may have heard of the author before because he wrote a book called The Overstory, and that one I think won like a Pulitzer Prize, and I think that one was just really popular overall. But this was my first time reading his books, and this fit the niche of the kind of fiction that I like to read, where it's fictional, but it includes themes surrounding wildlife and natural sciences in the natural world. So this one kind of focuses more on like the ocean and ocean biology or marine biology, but it was really interesting. I loved the characters in it, and the ending I think is what really stood out to me, which obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but it was one of those books that it ends and I immediately went online and looked at what people were saying and how people interpreted it, the ending. So I love books like that because then it like sticks in your brain and you think about it for like several weeks after. But I can read the blurb just so y'all know what it's about. From the Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Overstory, Playground is a sweeping, panoramic novel of the last wild place humanity has left to colonize, the world's largest ocean. 4 lives are drawn together on the history-scarred island of Makatea in French Polynesia, a tiny atoll that has been chosen to send floating, autonomous cities out into the open sea, assuming the island's residents vote to greenlight the project. This awe-filled book interweaves beautiful writing, rich characterization, profound themes of technology and the environment, and a deep exploration of our shared humanity in a way only Richard Powers can. So, after finishing this book, I did go ahead and buy the overstory, because if this, his most recent work was this good, I feel like the work that won an award is going to be like even better. So I'm really excited to read another book by him. And I do rate the books. So for this one, this was a 5-star read for me, which is kind of crazy because it was my first book of 2026 and it's already a 5-star read. So we're off to a really good start. Now, like I mentioned, the other books I don't own physically, which is a little tough because that means no tapping. But I do have my iPad to show y'all the other ones that I read. So the next book that I read was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And this is kind of interesting because it was my first Brandon Sanderson book. And for those of you who don't know, Brandon Sanderson is like a super popular, like high fantasy author with like, I don't even remember what the series is called, but it's like the Cosmere universe. And that he's like super, like everyone loves his series. And I was kind of scared to dive into the actual series, but I knew that he had made kind of like standalone novels that you could read separately. So I decided to try that first to see if I liked the writing style before jumping into a series, because his books are pretty big and I think it's a pretty lengthy series. So I tried Tress of the Emerald Sea. And I don't know, oh, here we go. So I can read the blurb. The only life Tress has known on her island home in an emerald green ocean has been a simple one, with the simple pleasures of collecting cups brought by sailors from faraway lands and listening to stories told by her friend Charlie. But when his father takes him on a voyage to find a bride and disaster strikes, Tress must stow away on a ship and seek the sorceress of the deadly midnight sea. Amid the spore oceans where pirates abound, can Tress leave her simple life behind and make her own place, sailing a sea where a single drop of water can mean instant death. So that is the blurb for the book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So for me that means that I enjoyed it, but it means I wouldn't like read it again, if that makes sense. I felt like this was definitely a cozy fantasy vibe, and I'm not sure if it's one of those things that you enjoy more, like if I would have enjoyed it more if I had read his other books first, because I think it is all related. But just reading it as like an outsider, with this being my first Brandon Sanderson novel, I did really enjoy it. It read kind of like a fairy tale. I think it was like a cozier kind of fantasy story, and I definitely lean more towards like darker fantasy. Not like gory or anything like that, but just like fantasy where the stakes are a little higher and the twists are kind of like gut-wrenching. And there is kind of a twist in this book, but it's not like, it doesn't make you want to cry. I like books that make me feel really emotional and make me devastated. So although I did enjoy this book, it didn't stick with me as much as a book like Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong, and things like that. So I did enjoy it. I think it's a good light read, and it was kind of like a nice break from like fiction that I had read previously. So that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. Sorry about the lights. Maybe again, if you have read it, Brandon Sanderson, let me know if it's better to read these standalones, because he has several, like Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and I think he just released a new one, or it's going to be released soon. I've seen it on like Book Talk or something. Let me know if those are more enjoyable if you've actually read his like series, because I might have to commit to that, but they're really big. Okay. And then the next book I read was a book I read for a book club that I had with a few friends. So it's not the kind of book that I would typically read, I would say, but that's kind of why I like book club, because you read stuff that you wouldn't normally pick, because my friends picked, we alternate picking which books we're gonna read. And for January, one of my friends picked Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Julian McAllister, and on the cover it says, "How do you stop a murder after it's already happened?" I do really like the cover. So this is more of a mystery, like thriller, not really thriller, but definitely a mystery kind of story. And let me read the blurb for y'all. It says, "Can you stop a murder after it's already happened? It is midnight on the morning of Halloween, and Jen anxiously waits up for her 18-year-old son Todd to return home, but worries about his broken curfew transform into something much more dangerous when Todd finally emerges from the darkness. As Jen watches through the window, she sees her funny, seemingly happy teenage son stab a total stranger. She doesn't know who the victim is or why Todd has committed such a devastating act of violence. All she knows is that her life and Todd's have been shattered. After her son is taken into custody, Jen falls asleep in despair. But when she wakes up, it is yesterday. The murder has not happened yet, and there may be a chance to stop it. Each morning, when Jen wakes, she's further back in the past, first weeks, then years before the murder. And Jen realizes that somewhere in the past lies the trigger for Todd's terrible crime, and it is her mission to find it and prevent it from taking place. Now, I listened to the audiobook of this, and I'm not sure if that was better or worse for my reading experience, because I think the woman who is narrating it, like narrating the audiobook, she had a very relaxing British voice, and it kind of lulled me to like sleep a little bit. I didn't fall asleep because a lot of the times I listened to it while driving, but it made me kind of sleepy and tired listening to it, because it's definitely, I don't consider it a thriller, it is just like a mystery, and that's not typically my cup of tea, but I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think I just like kind of more exciting, higher stakes, thrillery things. Like if I'm gonna read a mystery, I want it to be kind of really intense. So it was still enjoyable. I can't say too much without spoiling it, because it is a mystery and you're kind of putting pieces together as you read. So I think if this is your cup of tea, you might enjoy it. But for me, 3 stars is like, it was fine. It's just like an average book for me. But yeah, it does describe it as a thriller on Goodreads, but I didn't consider it very thrilling, but not in a bad way. Okay, so the next book I read in January was, let me show you all the cover. called The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. And this was my first Rachel Gillig book, and I was really impressed. I really liked it. I had heard really good things about this book. I think it was like in a lot of people's like top books of 2025, which kind of surprises me because I didn't know that this was a romance and fantasy. I thought it was just like high fantasy, but there's romance in it. Like, it's a big part of the story. So I think it qualifies as a romantasy, but I'm not too sure on the definition. But let me read the blurb. So it says, Sybil Delling has spent 9 years dreaming of having no dreams at all. Like the other foundling girls who traded a decade of service for a home in the great cathedral, Sybil is a diviner. In her dreams, she receives visions from 6 unearthly figures known as omens. From them, she can predict terrible things before they occur, and lords and common folk alike travel across the kingdom of Troms, windswept moors, to learn their futures by her dreams. Just as she and her sister diviners near the end of their service, a mysterious knight arrives at the cathedral. Rude, heretical, and devilishly handsome, the knight Roderick has no respect for Sybil's visions. But when Sybil's fellow diviners begin to vanish one by one, she has no choice but to seek his help in finding them. For the world outside the cathedral's cloister is wrought with peril. Only the gods have the answers she is seeking, and as much as she'd rather avoid Roderick's dark eyes and sharp tongue, only a heretic can defeat a god. I almost feel like that blurb doesn't do this book justice, because there's so many layers to it, in my opinion. But this is the kind of fantasy I was referring to earlier, where it's like it has like some devastating twists, I guess is what you would say, and it really like was just gut-wrenching to read at times. I love that kind of thing. So I gave this 4 stars, and this was like my last read of January, so we ended it on a good note, and it's made me really want to just keep reading fantasy going into February. So that's The Night and the Moth, and I know the second book, because it is the first of a series. I don't know if it's just going to be a duology or like a trilogy or something. I kind of was hoping it was just a standalone, because I really like standalone fantasy, and I feel like those are really hard to find. But there is a sequel coming out, and I'm really excited for it. I think it comes out in September of 2026, so exciting stuff. She did also write, Rachel Gillig wrote One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I think it's a duology, and people say that one's really good as well. So I might have to read those before the new book comes out. So yes, these are the 4 books. These are the 4 books that I read in January. I think it's a really strong start to the year. Again, I had 2 4-star reads and a 5-star read, and then just like a fine read for 3 stars. So it's pretty good for 4 books. So I just wanted to make that quick video. If you're not into that kind of book, I'm sorry if this was really boring. But hopefully it was just kind of nice background noise. And I will see y'all in the next video. So thank you so much for joining my corner of the internet, and I'll see you next time. Bye.